Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast. I really want to start there and just go, it's that time of the week again, but that only really works when you have a set schedule when people listen to. So it's that time again if you listen on a set schedule. Other than that, I am Emmett Lewis and I'm here with my co-host Mikael Christiansen. How are things going, Mikael?
Not terrible, I guess. Haven't done too much today. Bit of training.
Did you get a haircut?
Bit of that. Huh?
Did you get a haircut recently?
Oh, yeah, right. I did get a haircut, in fact. How did you notice? Oh, yeah,
I don't know. You're just looking very...
Me at the fucking screen.
Yeah, you're just looking very Terminator-ish.
Yes, but I mean, like, that's the only look I have. Like, the hairdresser, what did she say today? She said, like, yeah, your hair just goes all over the place, she said. And I'm like, yep, that's its default setting, and there's nothing I can do about it.
I think you need to embrace the movement coach look and grow a man bun.
Fucking shit. That reminds me. I'll tell all of you now my best haircut story. Because I was reminded of this today in a conversation, and lo and behold. So when I was, I don't know, I can't remember how old I was, but I mean, it's like 15 years ago, or a little bit less. It was 2007, and I had long hair, about to my shoulders, a little bit longer. I used to have it up kind of like in a top knot, before it was cool.
Oh yeah, but I had top knot before. It was never cool. Top knots were never cool. A man bun was okay / acceptable. A top knot was never cool. Okay,
fair enough, but.
Unless you're
I was rocking it, and it kind of looked cool sometimes, but most of the time it just looked like a piece of shit because I didn't really fixed it in any way. Anyway, so I think I was in the Oslo Central Station when we still were allowed to just do breaking there. We were like dancing in this just corner on the Central Station often, and I was there doing some shit with my friends, and then two girls come over and they say like, "Sorry, can we talk to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And they say, "Can we cut your hair?" And I'm like, "What?" "Oh no, we have like an assignment at like the hairdressing school for cutting someone's hair with about your length. Could you be interested?" And I'm like, "Sure. Yeah, so come by tomorrow and like to the studio and we cut your hair." Okay, fair enough. And I go there, and so I sit down in the chair. I find out what they're going to cut my hair is that like classic ladies kind of, I don't know what it's called. It has like a fringe, and like your entire head looks like a helmet essentially.
Oh, do I have a manager haircut?
Huh?
Yeah, I have. Basically. Can I speak to the manager haircut?
And I was like, yeah, basically that one. And like they cut me like that, and I look like an absolute fucking horror story. Like they cut me, and they had told me like, "Oh yeah, but we cut your hair short afterwards, no worries." But then like there was no time suddenly, and everyone had to wrap up really fast and left. And they said, "Yeah, but come by tomorrow and we fix it, no problem." And like I get up and I'm looking like Prince fucking Valiant right there, and it's like, fair. What the fuck do I do now? Like, and I like at the time I was wearing like bandanas and shit, like all hip hop, and. So, or maybe I was a cap, it doesn't matter. But I put something on my head and just like, Jesus Christ, I can't walk around like this. And I contacted them the next day, but they didn't fucking answer. So I had to just go to another hairdresser and say like, fucking help me. And the girl was like, wow, what kind of haircut is that? No, I was like basically cut like this by two hairdressers yesterday, blah, 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 blah. And then they saved me from being Prince Valiant forever. The end.
Is there any photos of you like that?
No, there are no photos actually, because I was wearing a cap the entire time I was Prince Valiant.
It's probably the time there's probably not enough like camera phones. The good old days when not everything was documented.
Like in ancient times, and like then I cut my hair short, and like I've never looked back since then. Anyway, we have a topic, don't we?
Do we? Do we ever have a topic? I'm already certain on this.
Emmett used to have long hair too. Blah 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 blah.
I had long hair. Well, I'll tell you about my favorite haircut too. Yeah, our topic today is actually it's very topical on that haircut point because the topic of the episode is failure, and clearly you had a haircut failure. So we're going to talk about all the times we have had haircut failures. This is a haircut podcast, by the way. Now, no, we're just going to talk about failure. The main question, I suppose, that we propose to ourselves on the podcast is the appropriate amount of failure per session when learning new skills. I think is kind of thing, and it's also I suppose we could kind of get into categorizing like what actually is failure and what isn't failure. Because it's kind of like, just because you fuck up and you fall out or you don't do what you intend to do doesn't mean you failed, oddly enough. But there is, I suppose, always this idea with circus, I think, and it's one of these things that it's always stuck with me. I done a workshop many years ago with, man, why do I always draw a blank? I always draw a blank on this guy's name, but he was the original director of this circus company called Art Chaos, and they were one of these first kind of like...
Art Chaos, it must have been Simo then.
No, older than that.
Not him? So
hold on, I'm just going to look this up. Yo, Jamie, look this up.
Oh, you are looking it up.
I'll let you want to, because I always forget his name.
Like the festival we were supposed to play Vald at, like that is run by Archaeos.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so it's their original troupe hero. And Ireland wrecked them as well. And it's even here on their thing. They're Metal Clowns, which was their thing. The tour of Metal Clown encountered financial difficulties after the tent was destroyed by gales in Tala, Dublin. So that led to the demise of Archaeos. And why don't they have the director's name? Okay, I'm going to have to put that in the notes because otherwise we'll be here all night. Anyway, the director's thing was he was doing a workshop an open workshop to circus for all circus artists, just mainly talking, doing some exercises and stuff like this. And his main point on circus was why circus is different from dance and theatre is circus proposes the risk of failure. And it is kind of this idea that we play with this a lot in our training. It's like we go up and we go, classic with aerial. It's like, the person who's going to fly across the air and grab onto the bar is proposing something, then either it's very like binary whether you've done it or not. And circus obviously tries to get a bit away from this in its dramaturgy nowadays, but there was this kind of idea like that jugglers and hand balancers are the ones that kind of are still closest to this idea of proposing failure and dealing with risk and risk of failure, because aerial, there's at the end of the day, there's a lot of safety equipment in aerial and a lot of it doesn't really rely on that kind of dramaturgy anymore, whereas juggling...
Acrobats, though.
Acrobats. Yeah, theatre boards, yeah. I suppose that one would definitely come under that. But even then, they have mats as well. This is the other thing I'm saying, like mats and safety equipment remove the illusion of failure, and that's what forces you to look for different dramaturgy in circus, because once you've taken the risk of death-defying out of circus. So the point is, like, with balance training, we are always dealing with the proposition of failure, that we have something we're proposing to do, and then we're either going to do it or not achieve it. And I think this gets into, even at a very fundamental level, I think this gets into people's thinking about hand balance quite early on. That so let's say, we'll go back to our beginner, tries to kick up the handstand, and, they propose the risk themselves. Will I get my handstand? Will I not? And they fail. And then it's very like, or they stick it for 5-10 seconds, whatever. And they have this kind of binary failure thinking. Whereas what we really want to start getting away is like, did I get specific on my failure? Like, I'm trying to kick up, but I'm not getting a kick up, but I'm trying to isolate one component of it and not fail at that versus take the whole picture at once.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought of one thing now. Now I'm going to be a bit tendentious, but I would almost say that, like, just on the term of circus, that circus fetishizes the idea of success and failure. Because, even within, a dancer can fall or mess up the choreography or do something that doesn't work, or like it can be, like, things can go wrong on the stage and theater, and it can happen. But it's kind of these. You are proposing, like you said, you're specifically proposing like the difficulty and the kind of course, the physical risk, but also the risk of humiliation, the risk of not managing. And I'm sure you've experienced and seen that a lot. Like the juggler who starts out the act, everything goes great. They drop a few times, they get increasingly stressed, and it just goes down the drain. And you're just suffering with them as you watch them on stage, because like they just lose their shit at one point and they can't keep it up. And I think that's happened, I guess, to many various performers within anything in sports or in, I guess, even in singing or playing instruments or whatnot. But it's at least, it's very evident since you are presenting it so clearly. principle of managing or not managing, kind of.
Yeah, actually, that kind of interesting. You just mentioned sport there, because I never really thought of this concept of risk is basically endemic. The risk in the battle is endemic in sports as well. Where it's like, oh, we're going to propose to hit the ball or kick the ball. Why is it always a ball? Anyway, that's a quote from my friend Sev, by the way. He's complaining about sports at the weekend. Hello, Sev. I know you're listening. Anyway, do something with a ball and then propose that, oh, this, but also in contest with the other. So that's the other side. We're going to get in the way of you doing your thing. So that's kind of interesting. I never really thought. But then circus is almost, as you said, fetishize this risk, where you've taken just the concept of risk.
Yeah, and you've also removed it from, like, you've specifically removed it from competition.
Yeah.
So it is no longer failing the other, or like it's not, or like not failing the other, but it's no longer losing against the other. It is,
it's literally just losing against gravity in most situations.
Yeah, and it's like, what's funny is that it becomes then about like losing face or losing, like you're showing a certain vulnerability of you either not having mastered the situation and kind of the entire, how to say, the sub-communication that happens within people when you see someone feeling safe and secure, and that micro shift that happens in all of the kind of mannerisms of the person in the moment the person becomes insecure and doesn't really know how to handle. They go from being intuitive and in the moments, and suddenly they're in their head and they're thinking about each and every step and what's happening. And this is what happens on stage too. When you suck, you're in your head and you're thinking about it and you're feeling yourself sucking, and then you feel that the audience is seeing you being in that state, and the audience sees and feels your suffering, and then it just becomes this like terrible, or it can become this terrible loop that you learn to deal with, and then just you're good enough at faking it or just keeping your shit together until you can kind of do it.
Yeah.
But like you said there's a very important thing in the fact that even outside of circus, this bleeds into various practices, and I mean, I think if we dissect it like all the way to kind of the bottom of why it's there, it's a social thing and kind of the human animal kind of thing of like various like symbols and signifiers of value, and you're proposing and presenting them. And if you do not achieve or do not manage or present them wrong, then the perceived or the said symbol and signifier isn't what's it called? Interpreted correctly by the ones viewing it, and then it equals that it wasn't correct or it wasn't good. I mean, this is also what we talk about when we use that concept of the federation, where you're in your own head telling yourself it wasn't good enough because that is something that you learned that you should be saying in this particular context.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of one of these things that I think it was from maybe Kabuki theater or something anyway, but they have the concept of even if you were to do a show by yourself in a room alone, there's always two people watching. Or there's always someone watching. So it's kind of that kind of thing of like, oh, even in your handstand practice, when you're doing your practice, even if you're training in your kitchen alone or wherever, someone's always watching. And that might just be in your head, or it might be that idea, but you're still, because you're presenting this idea of risk and failure, even to yourself, then, you become the reflection of the audience's anticipated reaction, I suppose. And then this is like,
exactly that.
Yeah, and then this, I feel, leads to a lot of frustration because people think they are being watched. Like, handstand training is frustrating.
Yeah.
Like, let's face it, bicep, like, going to the gym and say doing bicep curls or squats to failure, to the point where you have to like put the bar down the safeties and you can't finish. Yeah, the first kind of like, if you get stapled, like obviously it's embarrassing if someone has to bail you out, but like if you're using safety gear and everything is fine, you just can't finish a lift, it's not really a thing.
No, then you've basically done what you should if you're training to failure, basically.
Yeah, basically. So, but it's still like, oh, I've done it. Or even if you didn't get to failure and you're trying to train to failure, there's no real... For some people there is, but not really this kind of thing to it. Whereas in handstands, like, oh, I wanted to do 25 seconds and I done 24 seconds. failure and shame upon you for doing that. So it's kind of, there is interesting, just like even for our educated listeners here who know we're on a constant process of refinement, there still is always this idea of like the shame from failing.
Yeah. And I think that these things are entirely human and entirely normal. And rather than pretending that it doesn't exist, like you can accept it and just, okay, that's a part of how you function. Yeah. And then it doesn't need to be such a big deal. I think like pretending that you don't care makes it a bigger deal. At least like in like what I've observed in myself and in others. And like the more I'm okay with not being that great, the calmer I am around it. Whereas like if I actually care a lot, then I'll say that, yeah, you know, like I don't really care. It's all about the process. But in the end, like that's just like a buzzword I learned to say because like that's somehow the way you're supposed to do it. Whereas like I think it's also great to be entirely soul crushed. If like, I mean, it needs to be proportionate. Okay, like it can't be like, oh, I'm going to train my handstands for the first day, and you make an entire fucking Shakespearean drama because you can't get up within 10 tries. It's not that. Like, I just mean when, like, allowing yourself to pour passion and love into it, and that's gonna hurt sometimes and gonna be frustrating. That's fine. But as for the concept of taking this with you, and I think gym training, what you said, it's an excellent example. And like this period that I've had now, I've been doing the first time in my life where I've done one session of chin-ups with weights once a week, and I've done that for 6 weeks. And seeing how extremely simple it's been for me to make consistent gains with those, and also because like I have zero expectations of what does it mean to manage or fail, as I have like a very distinct understanding of in handstand. I go in, I put on some weights, I do a bunch of reps. Holy shit, now I'm really tired. Put them down. I forget about it. I repeat next week, and boom! Like I've had like outstanding gains in those weeks. And there is also the fact that like you are in such a context, you are actually focusing on the process. And it's kind of hilarious because we look at kind of gym training and weights as such a degenerate, or like a kind of not necessarily degenerate. Sorry to all of you who love to lift weights. It's great. And that's not what I mean. But like,
here's me just trying to shop for weight plates the last 2 weeks. Thanks.
It's, but like, it's kind of like it's a simple practice, but what you do is you go in and you do the things that you're supposed to do, and that's it. Whereas handstand training very easily becomes this thing where you come in, you're supposed to do a bunch of things, but you want to try something that's pretty cool, because then you'll feel pretty cool if you managed it. And then you try it 8 times and like, oh shit, you stuck it 3, and then like you ditched the rest of your program or the planned practice because you kept trying the same fucking thing 27 more times, and it didn't get you anywhere. And I think that's where, like, if we look at the kind of practical side of failure as well, it starts being important, because if it becomes this kind of constant chasing the dragon kind of attitude where what you're doing essentially when you train, you're trying to give yourself good, you're literally trying to feed yourself dopamine by getting the sensation of success. I managed the thing. I am a slightly cooler now that I managed the thing. If that's what you're doing, it is going to be harder to keep kind of a consistent practice than, I mean, there needs to be a part of that, because you need to have fun, right? It needs to be a little bit wild as well, but you need, if you have some sort of system to it, you might at least avoid going in the trap of just trying a gazillion times on loads of different things with absolutely no real purpose other than the hope of managing for the glory of it.
Yeah. I want to go back to that one because there's an interesting experience I've had a few times, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate with this one, where you're failing but you get it. And I can remember the clearest experience I ever had of this. I had a good few times when I was rollerblading, like, oh, I'm getting this line right, or I'm getting this jump right, but you're still fucking bailing. But the clearest experience I could have was like I was learning to juggle 5 balls, and juggling did not come easy to me in terms of earlier progressions. I'm okay at it now, but But I was learning 5 balls. I was trying it. And me and my friend, we didn't really have any technique. There was not much on the internet about doing it. We were just like, just do 5 balls. Just practice 3, do it a bit higher until you kind of get that rhythm, and then just do 5. So we're doing it. And I just remember this one day, I was at 5 catches or dropping, or not even getting beyond 6. But just there was one click, and it changed from like, you just don't know what you're doing. It's just you're just throwing balls in the air to, oh wait, you're failing, but you're failing in the right way. And that idea, like, you've probably felt this, you probably feel it like, you'll feel it at certain points in handstand, I feel, and you'll feel it like in kind of learning entries, like kick up, straddle up, tuck up, or whatever. You'll feel it in shifting to one arms, and generally you'll feel it like coming back from Mexicans and stuff like this. So this idea where there's like a transition zone or something going on, and it's a change in sensation. The body has learned to process the information almost. And then this is when you can start failing productively, because even though you're not getting it right, you have a very clear idea of what right should feel like. And that kind of hones your perceptual base that you have on the body. Go, oh, this is right and this is wrong. I've done this wrong, but I know what right is, versus just kind of throwing stuff into a dark room and hoping you find a teacup.
Yeah. And I think it was very important to make a distinction here now. It's like a lot of the things that we were just talking about now has to do with the kind of emotional and social side of failure, whereas like the practical thing of like there is a task at hand, you attempt, and then it works or not. That is something that is slightly different, though of course very connected.
Yeah,
and that's what we're more talking about now, and that's where it is really relevant in kind of a practice sense. You're able to distinguish at least slightly between these two nuances of failure, and the fact that like you need to, like, you cannot do everything on your first attempt, so you need to go through a lot of attempts, and like a good how to say comparison is like, let us say you have a person that is strong enough to do a stomach to wall handstand. It can be done, and it can be done for 10 seconds. And it's safe, it's okay, and it can be repeated several times. So that person can then successfully do this until they are so tired that there's unproductive to do it much more. And it's not very complicated to ensure that the person then will just be able to repeat it as many times as necessary done. There won't be any real failure in it. Whereas like what you're doing there is you get the body to experience the thing that you want to do for a full 10 seconds several times. Whereas on a kick up, for example, which is something that you will not, or quite likely, if you struggle with kick ups, or you're an average person that needs to learn to kick up, you need to try that and ridiculous amount of times, because each kick up you're spending so little time in this motion, getting there and falling back down or falling over. Like you're there for less than a second. Like it all happens so fast, and you're traveling through space. So for each angle you travel through, you're there for such a short time. So for your body to be able to process and understand and get this intuitive sensation of what's going on in this movement will take you a lot of time. And that's where it's like, where it's very important to know that, okay, yeah, in the beginning when you learn to kick up, for example, you're not trying to kick up and stay in the handstand. You're trying to teach your body how much momentum do you need with the legs, how much pressure do you need to apply with the shoulders, where do you put the hands, where do you look at the floor, do you tense your legs or not, do you bend the leg or not as you kick up. All of these things need like hundreds and hundreds of repetitions to build kind of a consistent pattern with. So those are the kind of things that you can then do. You can focus on one piece. You know you're not going to handle to get into the handstand, but you're still succeeding at doing work at the particular thing that is going to lead you to the handstand.
Yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. But I'm going to go on to something else. Yeah, it kind of blew my mind. But
oh my God.
Yeah, there's one other side of failure. There's a few other ones that I want to get onto as well. But one other side of failure is not being willing to fail.
Ooh,
that is Yeah, that is and it occurs at different stages in the practice. You get some people who are just like, I don't know. I suppose the very basic fear when you're learning the handstands: what if I fall? And this kind of fear of failure or fear of what might happen can be one thing to deal with. We'll probably have to have a different podcast on that whole topic. But the people who, I don't know, you get people who are unwilling to work on their balance and their other stuff, which is difficult, but then end up pushing the conditioning too hard. And I always find this like, oh, it's, you know, or I can't do that, it's too hard. I was like, well, it's going to be too hard because you haven't tried it enough. And you get this kind of thing, and it begins to creep in at like intermediate level as well. Because like, if we think about our normal handstand practice, if we're training solo, you're going to fall a lot. You're going to twist out. You're going to fall a lot. And then people stop challenging themselves by pushing their skill because they want to just get this kind of infinite precision and are unwilling to try new stuff that can be pushed them into this failure zone and this, I don't know, almost like an avoidance of shame.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like, and I would definitely say on very high levels, the shame avoidance thing really comes into play. Because then like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm pretty fucking good at this shit. Which means that like, I need to take such a step down if I'm going to try these other things. And that's going to be a big barrier. And like when I was in circus school, that was one of the large reasons why I never got good at acro. I was so good at handstands and I was so shit at acro. So it felt bad to go and train the acro. And it didn't help, of course, that like when I trained acro, I trained with teachers that had me do really difficult stuff that I kind of managed, but I never got it safe. I never got like the sensation that, oh shit, I'm mastering this. It was kind of, it was, I never got like into it. And of course, like it is totally fine. Not like you don't need to be good at everything. This is not like the case I'm trying to make, but the idea that, you don't dare to try something that you actually really want to because of, oh shit, yeah, but you know, like then I kind of need to take off my superhero cape and I just need to be a normal scrub that just sucks like everyone else does. Like it can be hard. And like it's usually when you get like, or what you experience in that situation when you are faced with that is kind of like you become very cerebral and you start thinking. It's like, oh yeah, you start coming up with excuses like, oh yeah, you know, like not because of this, not because of that, maybe next week, etc. Rather than just like, oh yeah, you know, fuck them, let's go. And I think a lot of people I've seen that have gotten like exceptionally good at a lot of things, they've been very naive and just like gone, oh yeah, that sounds fucking cool, let's just try it. And then like, okay, they suck and they laugh. Like when I remember like a Spanish guy in circus school, like he was one of the ones that learned Swedish the fastest because he spoke so fucking bad. But he would just speak to people on the subway. He would just like with his like crumbled Swedish, he would try and he would try and he would try. Zero shame.
I'm sure Swedish people love some randomer coming. Sorry. I'm sure some Swedish people love some randomer coming up to them on the subway to talk to them.
He's so innocent in his mannerisms that like he can be accepted by literally anyone.
Oh, that's kind of cute.
But yeah, it's I think it's very important to see kind of where this comes in and like where you like. I think also in terms of it can be interesting if we take this part of trying new things at various stages in one's practice and like let's now relate it to handstands. Let's say you're pretty good on two arms and like you want to learn the one arm journey, but like why? Like, can you walk? Can you like walk in a circle? Can you like walk sideways? Can you do all kinds of weird stuff that you maybe haven't imagined with the structure of the handstand? And if you can't, is it something that you'd be interested to try? And if not, why? So like asking yourself these kind of questions, because it can actually add quite a lot to be ready for going into that zone where you're still failing again, which means that you are potentially still learning again. Whereas like what you said, Emmet, with this infinite or this perceived infinite sharpening and precision of stuff, I find to be, I mean, I won't say it's a dead end, but I think it's not as alive as one might think it is, because like you're going to get super sharp and really good at it for a while. And then like, okay, yeah, 2 months pass where you had to travel or you have to do something, you couldn't train, and boom, you're back to square one. And then you need to just sharpen your pencil again.
Yeah.
And it might be interesting to branch out as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of one of those ones. Go back to a juggling example, actually, of all places. You see this a lot in juggling. I can actually think of two kind of counter examples of, I won't name names, but just jugglers who get caught up on technique and pushing the numbers and other stuff, and then even their vertical skills stagnates. Whereas if you look at, say, Jay Gilligan, who is amazingly creative at juggling, he just kind of I remember meeting him a few times, and one of the things he talked about was like he just would push tricks to basically 100 catches or even 50 catches, and then he was done with it. He'd put it away and go learn something else, because he was just always pushing the limit of what he could do. And people who know Jay Gilligan, or if you've ever seen his shows or checked them out, like, he's just amazingly creative and inventive and has a very large technical range because of this kind of like, oh, I'll try this out and I'll come up with an idea, and then obviously he has to go back and suck at it. So it's that kind of, there's an interesting...
I actually saw him on the street here a few days ago. We spoke briefly.
Oh, cool.
He was walking to the subway.
I have a funny Jay story that I can tell. So he was at the convention, a circus convention in Ireland. What was this? 2001, 2002, I think. And he was headlining the show there. Really nice guy, doing some workshops. One of the guys organized the show. He'd done a show and was in a student hall union place, and they asked him, it's like, oh, Jay, would you like a drink? After your show, do you want a beer or anything? And Jay returns, no, I don't drink. No problem, says the guy who's offering the round. Says, well, do you want a Coke or some water or anything? I was like, Jay was like, no, I don't drink. I only get all my liquid nutrition from food. And then he proceeded to eat 2 or 3 packets of crisps.
Oh, wow.
So there's my Jay Gilligan story.
That is an interesting way of doing it. I mean, I am like, he's not dead, so
it definitely works.
It worked at least for a period of time.
Anyway, off Jay, because I'm sorry, I just want to cover one point. So anyway, there is one kind of point here of something I learned in the masters I did. It applies to startup design, and when you're building a new product, is fail often, fail fast, and fail cheap. So to take this idea to handstands, like, you're going to need to fail on your handstands when you're learning stuff new. So that's okay. And fail often. Just keep trying stuff. Fail fast. Fail fast, I think, is an interesting one, because, like, particularly when you're getting to learn something, or if you're at the point where you can fight, not sometimes, like, this is where a lot of the injuries happen, particularly when people are just beginning to learn one arms, is they fight a bit too much. And they don't fail fast enough. They're kind of like suffering in, this is the thing. These are shades of grey and not binary thinking, as we've been touching on. Where it's like, oh, if you push the failure too hard or just fail too often in directions you're not prepared, or just force it, you're not failing cheap, because you're potentially risking an injury. So our cheap failure is the ones where you just get down, you're able to go again. An expensive failure is when you have to sit down for a month or two.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's interesting also, like, they're with kind of the failure, like energy management and these things that we've spoken about before, that you, as you practice, I mean, you're going to be falling over, you're going to be like trying to do whatever task it is at hand, you're going to try that a bunch of times. And just as like, if you learn the grips on the guitar, you have the comfort of, like, your fingers won't get tired that fast, so you can probably try to do those grips for like hours. Like your fingers will get sore, sure, but you can keep trying, and like after a while, it's likely that you won't be that much worse than when you started. Whereas with like physical training such as this, of course, like, you're doing a very skill focused thing, but at one point, like, your shit will start to deteriorate, because like your tiredness is catching up with you. So starting, like, being able to, how to say, see this as well, because there's a different thing to fail what you're doing, because like you're too tired to even bother trying, but you're stubborn enough to keep doing it, that is a different type of failure than like, okay, I keep trying, and my trying means I'm calibrating, compared to like I'm just too dead to bother, and then you keep doing it anyway. So like starting to kind of get to know yourself in these areas, I think is immensely important. And also in terms of like what kind of criteria you're setting for yourself when you're training. Like I had several periods with this, like I need to do 4 of this one and 4 of this one before I move on, for example. And like it can be useful, but it can also be something that just like gets you needlessly stuck on certain days because you're just trying and trying. Okay, you just did 3.5 of it and you're annoyed, and then you spend loads of energy getting the 4th, which means that like you start things further down the line go garbage. So it's important to think about these things. And also like if we're speaking balance, like I've mainly now thought more about kind of the technical elements of entering and kind of these things. But when you are in there and you're doing the stuff, then like as we've spoken about before, what we try to do in terms of teaching is basically take like the conditioning and the technique act as boundary conditions within which you can learn how to balance and do so effectively. But like, and that learning process is falling and failing and like struggling and like trying to stay on your hand. And when you're in that state, like if you are focused on balancing and you stay there for a few seconds and you fall out, like you can usually trust that like even if you didn't stay a long time, like your brain was calibrating, your brain was doing stuff, and the total accumulated time of doing stuff will add up over time. Hence, like a set of 8 seconds can be very worth it. And like it might even be so that during your 8 seconds, you actually did such a good job compared to your normal 15. You fell out of the 8, but hey, like the calibration might even have been better. So like you can never know with all these things. And like you can only kind of see the results of them adding up over time.
Yeah, it's definitely handstand practice. It definitely like pays in compound interest. It does not pay in like linear balance. So everyone, get your diamond hands on for your handstand practice. Where were we? So one of the things I actually wanted to talk about is physical failure. When we're talking about like muscular failure, not technical or balance failure as well in training. And it's one of these things that it doesn't really like, I don't suppose I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but maybe we should, in terms of like, say when we get into the conditioning aspects of our programming, we are in particular, like, let's say the way I would normally program, just say you warm up, you'd have technical exercise to get you into your practice. Then you would have the main sort of practice goals for the day as the middle block. And then the last thing would be conditioning. Now, depending on what you're doing and how advanced you are, this could be something different. It could be presses, strength work, whatever. But something that's going to try and raise the physical capacities. One of the things we're looking for here is almost incomplete. I want incomplete rest and incomplete recovery on these sets as a measure of practice. So it's like, let's say we'll use a beginner's example. You have done your kick-ups, you've done some heel pulls and some toe pulls, and you've done a bit of playing with your balance. Now it's time to push the capacity. So we're going to go back chest to wall, or back to wall handstand, something like this, or tuck at the wall, something using the wall anyway to reduce the balance out, because we always train that. And then it'll be like, okay, let's do some holds, and this is where we might have strict rest periods. Because let's say we go, okay, I want you to do 4 seconds of 20 to 30 second tuck handstands and rest 1 minute in between. So this is incomplete rest in terms of strength training zones, and hopefully you've accumulated fatigue. So you might do 30 seconds on the first set. And now if you rested 3 or 4 minutes, you could probably repeat that 30 seconds. But that's not really what we want to do. We want to build up this kind of pushing into the burn. So maybe we'll have the 1 minute or 90 second rest. And then it'll be like, oh, you'll see the step down will be 25 seconds on the second set, and then 20 seconds on the third set. And this kind of performance decrement is kind of what you're looking at. And then you go, okay, I tried 3 sets, this is where I failed. I tried 3 sets of 30 seconds. okay, and I've achieved it. And then I've done 30, 25, 20. Then next week you might do 30, 27, 23. And this kind of idea of pushing to failure, but then slowly it'll increment up. And it's one of the things, like, it can be used, straight body holds or dish holds. It could be, once you get kind of used to them, it could be used in like freestanding tuck handstands, other kind of stuff. And this doesn't really, it should be a feature of your training, but I think a lot of people don't actually have it as a formal idea per se, but they would if they're doing strength training. So it's always this idea of like looking for pushing to failure to the point where you can't. Now, this is the other thing, is like, we are inverted and we do have to have a bit of a safety tolerance zone. So we can't go, a lot of the time you can't go all out to failure, but at the same time, there should be room in your training to find these kind of exercises where you can push the failure for the other muscle groups.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like in any kind of training block you have where endurance is the focus, like you on purpose are trying to push yourself into a new, like you're basically trying to push the numbers. So let us say from 45 seconds to a minute, for example. Arbitrary times, but I mean, they are to a degree relevant anyway. And one thing that I love to do with exactly that range, or from 30 and so on as well, is just set up your balanced handstand stomach to wall, stay until you can, until you literally start losing balance, and put your feet back on the wall and stay up a while longer. So that kind of you add to the actual time you're staying in balance, and you're going into the burn. It's just you're not going down yet. And obviously, like the things that you just spoke about now in terms of rest times and things are directly relevant, since what you do, like there, it's like you're trying to overload the muscles so that they compensate by getting like the literal muscle capacity better, because like we do have the thing of getting good at adjusting, so we don't need to crank the fingers at all times and so on. That is part of it. But we need to be able to crank the fingers to a certain degree, because if you want to stay up for a very long time, you're going to start using them a significant amount anyway. So yeah, like there's this kind of like oscillation between both of those that kind of go into it. And I think that, like, I mean, there's loads of different trains of thought in terms of like training to failure and not, and so on. But you like for the physical development, in some regard, you need to push yourself. If your intensity, your frequency, and your volume are all low, like you're basically not doing anything. Yeah. So like if you crank one of them, then you might have to crank it quite a lot. If you crank two of them, you don't need to crank them all that much. If you crank all three of them, well,
you better hope you're on trenbolone.
Yeah, exactly. Then you need to call up that shady guy down on the gym and ask him for some how you can get access to the power source.
Yeah. So tap me into the matrix, bro. Yeah, there's kind of an interesting one that it obviously for a lot of our home people are training at home, but if you're in classes, and this is one of the benefits I think of having a good coach who can spot well, particularly in one arms and other stuff, is you, even just two arms as well, is you can get a lot of time when you can work on your capacity basically, and then when you make a technical mistake, the coach can put you back into balance or not let the technical mistake get outside the zone one kind of corrections. And this allows you to really get in, and this, some of my most burning shoulder sessions have just been like with a coach, just like, okay, you're just going to make sure you stay up here for a minute on your arm, and just like, would not be able to get close to that one thing. But then we have like coaches like starting off with gentle corrections and then moving on to like the ones that hold your legs, then moving on to the ones where like I'm just holding you on place on top of your shoulder and kind of casually lifting you. And these are, I think I wouldn't go all out in every single session to these kind of sets, but I think there is a lot of advantage to these. Like, it's almost beyond failure training. And it is beyond failure training, because like it starts off with like a balance assist, and then it moves on to like a kind of position maintenance assist. And then if you know what you're doing, you'll kind of lift up a bit and you'll deload the person. So instead of weighing 70 kilos, they'll weigh 60 kilos. So it's literally kind of like a drop set for handstands. And it's the same with like spotting presses and other stuff.
Yeah, I was using stuff like that in Copenhagen when I taught one of the girls there. Like she was so close to one arms. So I just finished her sessions like that. I think we would do like, I don't know, 10 or 15 or so transfers from one arm to one arm where I'll just lightly spot her hips and it's like, okay, now you're getting tired. I'm holding onto your legs. And in the end, like I was like literally lifting her and then like she went down. And yeah, those kind of things can be very useful, but it's just that is a high volume thing and it gets really intense. And like if you're doing that kind of work, you really need to ensure that you're getting the recovery you need, or else you're basically playing Russian roulette with your wrists and your shoulders.
Yeah. I think the rule of thumb, I picked this up, I think it was Charles Poliquin, but I'm open to be corrected on this one, is for natural trainers, only have one intensity technique set per week. So if you're doing like some beyond failure stuff like drop sets or micro drop sets or all these kind of things, only do one exercise with, per week, basically on a per muscle group per week, and not do every single one as drop sets. This is the kind of thing. This is where, yes.
Because drop sets, you're trying to get fucked basically when you do that, aren't you? Yeah.
And it's basically what I described with that one, that like beyond failure training, super high intensity training. And it's kind of interesting to play with. And it's definitely interesting if you have a spotter, or if you want to learn to spot with your friends you're training with, even if you're not adequate, it can be nice to play with. These kind of like, and sometimes like it's this kind of idea, like particularly with the spotter sets, of like just seeing how far you can actually go before you have to quit. And that can be quite an interesting experience where like you're like, okay, we just set a proposal, once again going back to failure, I will hold a 3-minute handstand and the spotter is going to make sure I stay up for 3 minutes. Do we suggest every single handstand is like this? No. Do you try and achieve it? Yes. Do you safely try it with a spotter? Yes. Are we proposing you fail like this every single day? No. But
I remember like the only time I worked on like real endurance work was actually like, it's kind of the dumbest kind of endurance work you'd ever see. But like was when I worked on the cruise ship some years ago. I had absolutely meta fucked my wrist. Like it was like I'd done like a jump switch on a cane and the entire cane moved like hell. It was before I went on the ship, so I did perform on like a fucked up wrist that I basically took like tons of ibuprofen, and I used electrical tape like gaffa to fucking just make it into like a battle gauntlet, that hand, because I had to one arm on it, because I was doing like a walking in a circle on the canes, and I had to do like one arm on my left arm, and on ships that move, it's just a pain in the ass to balance on anyway. But like the wrist was basically dead for weeks on end, and I would do endurance sets on my elbows. So I do because I can do like a one elbow balance, like when I balance on the forearm, and I can hold that balance decently on my right arm. But I'd basically do that against the wall, stomach to wall, going from hand to hand, since I couldn't load the wrist. And I would do that. I don't remember if I did it. Maybe I did like twice a week or once a week or so. And then like I would, like my mindset was basically, because I couldn't train much on the ship because it was moving way too much and I didn't have any space. It just, hand balancing in general was just a mess there. I didn't have like the real space to do real training on my own. So I had this one wall in the room like the suite I stayed in. And I would just do this. And since I didn't do any other training, I was like, every time I was going to go up to the wall, I had like 2 songs I'd put on, and the goal was to get through both of them, because that would be 10 minutes. And like, I remember like I'd push myself, because in endurance, I hate pushing myself like past a certain point. I'd rather do something short and very intense, power focused, and like drag on forever kind of shit, like fuck planks and that kind of stuff. But
infinite planks.
Yeah, but here I was just going and going and going and going and going until like you just like feel like your arms are literally gone, but you're still standing on them somehow. And when you finally come down, you're just like, okay, I'm fucking done. I think I came up to like 13 minutes or something like that. And it was a rather quick to get to, because each time I was going way beyond, and I had like it was a terrible experience being upside down. But by like the second, third week or something, I was up by 10 minutes and just being like, hey, I can just keep going with this. So it can certainly be effective if you have the time.
But ain't nobody got time for that.
No. Yeah, but I think also in terms of, I mean, if we think about all things failure related, of course, it's easy to, this entire thing, the master has tried more times than the beginner, blah, 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 blah. Shut the fuck up. Like, I'm so tired of those kind of dumb quotes.
The master is the one who has passed the survivor bias, not necessarily his training is that good. He just survived.
Exactly. Like it's good to have. It's good to push yourself past certain points. It's good to allow yourself to fail and all that, and just. But I think ultimately, to me, I think some of the most important things in this is what we started off by saying. Actually, like this kind of judgment that we carry ourselves, and most often more towards ourselves than others. We're like many people are very good at being nice to others, but when they're going to judge themselves, so yeah, I'm the worst in the world. Oh my fucking god! I used to be like that too, and now like I did that for so many years, and it brought me fucking nowhere. Yeah. So I really decided to just go, well, just drop this kind of act, because it doesn't help. But being kind of allowing yourself to not be that ashamed by not managing the thing, I think is in general a very good quality to have, particularly if you want to kind of do this sort of thing for a long time. I think that is kind of inevitable for it, so that like you're actually slowly but surely kind of coming to terms and coming to peace with the kind of activity that you do.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's that kind of thing of like, I remember having a conversation with a lady who was working as a personal trainer, and she was basically kind of worried about how people would perceive her. She came into the gym. Honestly, she had a bit of weight to lose, but she wasn't that bad in general, or really anything. And she was concerned about people, like, what would they think of this kind of fat person? She wasn't fat, once again, it was very body image based, coming to train. And I just kind of pointed out to her, everyone in the gym, no one is watching you. The only person who is judging you right now is you. Even me, who is paid to judge you, isn't judging you, because now we just have a plan, we're just going to do it. And that's the kind of thing, like, if you're training at a gym and you're worried about, like, are people watching? You know what? Most of the time people aren't watching, and if they are and know nothing about handstand, they're probably impressed, even if you like are just doing a wall handstand. So, you know, the fear of the other is probably unfounded unless you're within a certain circus group. But even then, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, the only thing circus people will judge you for and properly judge you for is not pointing your toes and not locking your knees. Everything else, if you fall out, most of the circus people have fallen out of their equipment or whatever they've done for a very long time. Generally, they've done it with very nice knees and pointed toes, though, so that's okay. So no microbending is failure. Or, sorry, not no microbending is failure. Everything else is okay. You can fail, but just make sure you're failing at the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also it's important, actually, like, I mean, this is more from an anthropological standpoint, but that, like, it's very common to imagine that, like, you can live without passing judgment upon everything, whereas most of neuroscience and anthropology argue that what we're doing is we're passing judgment onto the world all the time. But that doesn't mean that we're doing it necessarily in the good versus bad thing. It's just that, like, we're as we understand the world, we are also, like, putting value on certain things and kind of using that as a tool to navigate. And I think just, like, having kind of a critical view on that and just thinking, okay, yeah, I have these in-learned ways of looking at things, and I can critique them. I can think about them. Is this useful? And I think particularly there is, like, when it comes to practices like hand balancing, which tends to attract a lot of kind of self-flagellating people that love to kind of use this as like their metric of personal success. I think that it's important to be able to put that at kind of a distance, because you end up putting way too much demand on yourself and on kind of the perfection of all these fucking lines and all this that needs to be like this and like that, because then it's correct, and then it's all just a fantasy. It's all just something in your head, and like exactly like you said, Emmett, it's no one's judging you around here but you. And I remember like I'd worry about these kind of things often. Like I'd train and fall, and you'd kind of just like, oh shit, now everyone saw me fall. And for like, especially when I was doing breaking, like when I was younger, I used to be an idiot with this and kind of almost demonstrate that I wasn't happy about about my failure, because I should be doing better, and I would kind of get angry. And then like, as I kind of realized that I'm just pulling an act now, because I'm just being a little shit. So just shut the fuck up and just, okay, relax. It's okay. I don't need to excuse myself to the next guy because I didn't manage to do the thing. I just didn't manage to do the thing. And the worst thing is that person didn't need my excuse, because they're in the same situation. They know how it is. They weren't thinking, oh, he fell out of the handstand, he's not my friend anymore, I am not going to give him work. No one thinks like that. But like, we're producing these like ridiculous kind of monsters in the head in that sense. And that's where I think it's the most important place to draw the line with this, and just look upon it as like, okay, yeah, because you're going to come in tomorrow and in 2 years and you're going to fuck up the same things. It's okay. Like, become okay with it as soon as you can. And it might be a long process to do so, but start it.
You will fail. And you will, basically, handstand is the art of trying to battle gravity. You're fighting a planet. This is what you're doing with handstands. You cannot win. So by definition, you're going to fail.
Planet battle.
So it's just like, that's it. Yeah. Like, there's literally no winning in this battle.
You're literally trying to be Death Star.
Yeah. Your handstand is Alderaan, and that's gravity is the Death Star. I think we're going to leave it there. Yeah. So
commencing primary ignition
sequence. Wet ready the weapon. Other than that, thank you for listening into us in the Handstand cast. I don't have any notes this week. Yeah. Other than that, we will catch you next week.
The Handstandcast is brought to you by Handstand Factory and is produced by Motion Impulse. Thanks for tuning in. You can find a full transcript of each episode along with the show notes and any relevant references on handstandfactory.com/podcast. Thanks to Isaac for editing and Jordan for transcriptions. Music by Daniel Horwath. If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee on buymeacoffee.com or consider starting one of our Handstand Factory online programs. Links are in the show notes.